Here is sacrifice number 1, knight takes f3 check. Here is sacrifice number 2, knight takes e4. Rook takes c3, here is sacrifice number 3. And finally, after king f1, now for the most beautiful sacrifice. This is the 4th sacrifice in just one game of chess. Incredible. This game was pointed out to me by Olympio Urkan on Twitter. It is between Mark Narciso Doblan and Bernadsky. This has been called the Ukrainian Immortal. What a sacrificial game coming up. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, f3. Maybe black is a Grunfeld player, so f3 played means black may prefer King's Indian setups. So bishop g7 is now played rather than going d5. Some Grunfeld players, they don't really love this setup. Take, take, we have e4, knight b6, knight c3, bishop g7, bishop e3. White will castle queenside, and this is just a different variation. Castle, queen d2, knight c6, castle, and f5. I'm just pointing out this variation because there was a fascinating game between Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen after e5 f4 was played. This has been seen 3 times, just sacrificing a pawn because this bishop has the option to go to f5. It could go to e6, and then we are controlling the d5 square. However, in this game, bishop g7, we have a King's Indian same-ish type of structure with c6 and d6. Knight e2, a6 played with 369 games in the Chess24 database, and after c5 we have 188 games. c5 makes sense because you're trying to stop b5. If black plays that, then you will en passant. But what surprises me is that when black is going for a queenside expansion, white has a nice move here which scores very highly with g4. Now let's check out the Chess24 Opening Explorer. Looking at this, you can see white's score is very high, above 50% for almost every variation. b5 is the most common move, which we will look at now, but white's score is just so high. In this line, we can see there are 35 games. Now g4 has the idea of going after black's king, but really it is about putting this knight on e2 to g3. This is a great square for the knight. Let's have a look at this line. After g4, b5, the most logical option. Now let's go knight g3. Bishop on f1 now wakes up. You can take on c4 if there's a capture, and white can keep expanding on the king side. Knight bd7 looks good as well. h4, e5, if you play e5, striking in the center, white gains even more space with d5. Take, take, and I think white has a nice plus here. Very dangerous really, h5 or g5 are coming. Queen d2 is possible, you can castle queenside, or you might go bishop e2 and actually castle kingside. c5 played in this game, and knight bd7, and now c takes d6. E takes d6. Already it feels like black has done a great job. White does not have much of a center anymore. He doesn't have a c4 pawn. Black has traded the c4 pawn for the e7 pawn. Now going back here after knight d7, what if white tries to clamp down on the queen side with knight a4? Or else really what are we saying? White has not got any opening advantage. Black breaks it up with b6, and now c takes b6 is a good option. What happens if you maintain the pawn chain with b4? There won't be a pawn chain anymore. Black will take it apart with a5. What if you keep maintaining it? Well, there's so much pressure on the queen side now, there's so much tension. I think it'll favor black. Let's capture on b4, let's capture on c5, and now let's capture again. Queen side opening up, white's king is still in the middle. Not a good strategy for white. Knight takes e5, let's take on a1. Lots of things coming off. And here we see the problem. Bishop on g7 is eyeing the queen. So knight takes e4 is possible. So after knight a4, going back to this sub variation b6, best is, well, the pawn center is crumbling, just in a different way when we compare this to the game. Take, take, knight c3, take, take, queen b6, queen c2, rook b8. and the game goes on. I think black is absolutely fine here. Maybe black's structure is a bit weak, but he does have counterplay, and that is all we can ask for in a King's Indian. Back to the game, c takes d6 played, take, and now knight g3. It's a shame really, this pawn is not on g4. If it was, white would have lots of chances to gain play on the king side. But in such a position, black has all the potential. Knight g3, b5, bishop e2, c5, and now castle. Black now takes it apart with cd4 and bishop b7. White has the pawn chain, g2, f3, e4, but the d6 pawn is just so useful. I think it is more useful. It's got dynamic potential. It controls e5 and c5. We'll see shortly. Rook e1, rook c8, bishop f1, rook e8, and now rook c1. It doesn't feel like white has much of a plan. Knight e5, queen b3, and now h5. It started off as a King's Indian, but the pawn structure and the piece placement resembles that of a Najdorf and a dragon. So we have a Dragadorf here. h5 played, and now knight h1. Knight on g3 is doing nothing, hence Narcisco chooses to reroute it to f2. When it is on f2, it defends e4. Knight h1, and now crashing through with knight takes f3 check. Sacrifice number 1. What is happening? This game has been called the Ukrainian Immortal, for example by Olympio Urkan on Twitter. Knight takes f3 check. Take. This capture means the white king is exposed on the g file. Sacrifice number 2 coming up. Knight takes e4. This sack allows the black queen to come into the position to g5. Also, the bishop on d4 is hanging at the moment. In the game, f takes e4 played, but firstly we will look at bishop takes g7, going into some beautiful geometry. No point taking back, let's get the queen into g5 check. Very important to put the black queen here because the white king does not have the chance to go to g2. So you go bishop g2, only good block. And now, nice geometry, queen c5 check. Beautiful. Knight f2 is forced. If you go king f1, really cool move, because I thought it was just winning the queen, but knight d2 is checkmate. The king can't go to the e file, and all squares are covered. Beautiful. Queen c5 check, knight f2, queen takes f2 check. So then the king can hide in the corner, but not to worry, the queen on f2 with the rook on e8. They're both on their perfect squares. Throw in a nice check with knight g3, using the rook on e8. Take, and now we can just take on g7, and black is up a lot of material. F takes e4 played in the game, allowing bishop takes d4 check. It just feels like mate, the two bishops are just working so well. Knight f2, queen h4, forcing a way to defend. So let's go rook c2, and now we have sacrifice number 3, rook takes c3, boom. e4 is falling. B takes c3 played in the game, you can't play rook takes c3 because queen f2 check, and then that's it. King h1, queen in here. B takes c3, queen g5 check, bishop g2 forced. If you go king h1, rook e4, it's the same weakness really. All these pins, and they'll be checkmate very soon. If you go knight e4, we've seen it already, queen g1 mate. If you go the other option, rook e4, you take anyway, bishop e4 check, forcing knight e4 with the same final move. Bishop g2 played, and rook takes e4, crashing through. You cannot take with the bishop because of the queen on g5. Pinning it to the king, you cannot take with the knight because of the bishop on d4. King f1 played. Let's have a look at rook e4, bishop e4. Now if you go king f1, trying to run, the position just collapses. You cannot take on d4 because queen g2 is mate. You cannot go king f1 because queen g2, queen g1, everything just falls apart. Queen f2 check. If you can't see mate, you can always just grab everything and then you'll just be a piece up. King f1, white decides to sidestep, and now for the most beautiful sacrifice. This is the 4th sack in just one game of chess. Crashing through straight away. After king f1, a beautiful sacrifice, queen takes g2 check, take a bow. What a pleasure to have played such a move in a real game. Queen takes g2 just works. King takes g2. Notice here, do not blunder with rook takes e1 check, because after king takes e1, there's a huge problem. Both bishops are hanging at the same time, and there's no move here to solve both problems at once. You will lose one of these bishops and then white will be winning. If you go queen g2, cd4 looks good. Oh no, careful, bishop f2 check, rook f2 only option. Bishop g2, here we go, queen f7 is hanging, of course it is. Yikes, white has a mate all of a sudden. Whoa, that's harsh, man, that is harsh. So maybe after king f1, it's the only move, man. You've got to play queen takes g2 check, just crashing through. Beautiful move. Take, rook takes e1 check. Rook on e1 guards all those squares on the first rank. Bishop on b7 is controlling all these light squares. Bishop on d4 will come back into the action. Knight e4 played. But what if king g3? Let's use the dark bishop. Bishop e5 check. King h4, bishop f6 check. King g3, rook e3 check. King f4, and now mate in one with the rook, rook f3. Bishops guarding everything. Picturesque, really. Now, after this, you have to block with the knight just to delay mate, but if you don't block, well, we've just seen the checkmate. Knight e4, we take anyway, king g3, and now one more move, and white resigned, beginning with rook g1 check. After rook g1, the guy resigned. Let's have a look at a few options. Firstly, let's look at king f4. The guy cannot run because of rook g4 is mate. If you go to the h file, that's it, man. King h4, bishop f6, king h3, bishop f5. And the other square doesn't matter, it's really just the other order of the bishops. If you go king h3, bishop f5, then bishop f6. If you enjoyed the show, why not like the video and subscribe to the channel at the same time. Hit that bell to get notified each time I release a new video.